Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back, everyone. Welcome to all the new listeners out there. This is the Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network, www.tfrlive.com, where we always like to say that we give you protection from deception and silence is consent. So I hope you've all had a lovely weekend. What a big week we have got ahead of us right here on KBS, because tonight, in a moment, we're going to be joined by my good friend, author Charile Robinson. We've got so much to get into and so little time to really pull it all apart and get a laugh about it. And then tomorrow night, I'm going to be joined by our show sponsors. That's right, Ronnie McMullen from GetTheTea.com will be on in hour number 1 tomorrow night. And in the second hour tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about something that you won't have heard many places before. And it's going to bring you right up to date with the latest technology. That's as much as I'm going to say. So that's tomorrow. And then on Wednesday night, we're going to be rejoined by Bernie Taylor. Now, Bernie's been on before. And this time, though, we're going to talk about quantum consciousness, the quantum field, all good quantum woo. And then in hour number 1 on Thursday, to round off the week, we have got the man behind the Trends Journal coming on, Gerald Celente. He is going to be coming on to the show to break down the year ahead. In fact, that's hour number 2 on Thursday. I'm really, really looking forward to that. There's a shout of Nano Girl in the chat room. Well, on the 27th of December, Armand, I am very happy to say that Nano Girl will be on for the full 2 hours. We'll be doing our annual decoding of the Rothschild Economist cover and getting into a whole lot more. So everything to look forward to. So like I was saying, tonight I'm joined by my good friend, and I'm really happy I can call him that. He's one of the guys that comes on here once a month, and I'm always delighted when he shows up. But for all those new listeners out there, and I know the show's growing all the time, and if it isn't, everyone out there, you need to share this to at least 3 people, right? That's your mission for tonight. So it says Charile Robinson is the author of The Octopus of Global Control, a controversial and hilarious, and I'm telling you, it is hilarious, book that features the opinions of over 500 experts that expose and explain the century-long plan for world domination by that creepy global elite. Now, he had a front row seat into the fraud and the corruption in the mortgage industry during a 10-year career in Las Vegas real estate. And he credits John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, as the final piece in the puzzle that helped him to really see how the American government operates. Now, Charlie is also an entrepreneur with a marketing degree from the University of Southern California and agrees with comedian Bill Hicks, who I too love, that everyone in marketing should just go away and kill themselves. So, Charlie, I'm glad you haven't done that and you haven't entered the world of marketing. So, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me back. The day's not over yet. I'm still liable to, after banging my head against the wall with the insanity of what's going on in this world, I feel like sometimes I should just go Bill Hicks style and just jump off my balcony.
I think I've got whiplash this weekend because I've been shaking my head that much, and I've got a big lump on the front of it because I've been banging it off the desk. And it all seemed to start, and it's been an escalation from the point that I've seen that they're actually going after Santa, dude. You know, Christmas is coming up, and we're entering a crazy period of time where we'll no longer be able to call him Father Christmas. Not that it's ever offended anyone in the past, nor should it either, but it's going to be Person Christmas from now on, dude, because of all the political correctness. And, you know, we can't be offending anyone.
I remember the days as a kid waiting for that non-binary man to slide down the chimney and bring me all the presents in a lecture about how we have to take seriously the 53 different genders that are happening, and we have to have gingerbread people instead of gingerbread men because that would be upsetting to gingerbread women. I remember it like it was yesterday, Kev.
Well, you see, the thing is, I mean, surely ginger in itself is kind of intimating some kind of anti-ginger-haired mentality.
Yeah, it's offensive. It's damn offensive. So how dare you?
bread man or bread person, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We need to live in a world where nobody's offended and everybody's happy. It's madness. I feel like I feel like I'm in a parallel universe where I'm watching these things and I'm waiting for someone to go, hey man, we're just messing with you. It's all just a big joke. We just wanted to see what your reaction would be. But that hasn't happened so far. I think they're serious about this. I think they're serious about the actual need for a third restroom. I think they really honestly think that gingerbread man is offensive to a woman and that that this is a priority. We need to take care of this right away. I mean, this is madness. This is classic Orwellian controlling the language. And, I think a lot of people have talked about how, you and I have talked about how the media gets involved and controls the language. And you mentioned you're going to have Gerald Celente on this week. And I quoted him in my book because he had this great line. He said that the Washington Post should change their motto to today's news tomorrow, retractions to follow. And I love him, and so I will be listening when you have him on this week because I think that guy has got it. But you want to see somebody freak out and get totally out of his mind, frustrated? Watch Gerald Celente. He's hilarious, and he's right, by the way. I mean, almost everything he says, I'm nodding my head in agreement, like yes, yes. And really, the point of his whole thing is like, we're all adults here. You don't have to tell me what I'm allowed to see or what's real and what's fake. I can figure this all out. And he takes an analytical approach to it, of course, for Trends Journal and for his investment advice and things like that. But in order to understand where the investment, to get his investment advice together, he's got to understand where we're going socially. And where we're going socially is into this really weird spot where you can't criticize, you can't call somebody Santa Claus and imply that he's a man because that might be offensive to people that consider themselves to be non-binary Santa people. And, and it's just, everybody just needs to just relax and, or remove themselves from this situation. This is, being offended is not an excuse. You're offended from what I say? Turn it off.
Can I ask you one thing, though, right? And
sure.
I was thinking about this today because I've been looking at so many of these stories, and the ones we've brought up are perfect for this because up until the point when the media start talking about it, did you ever come across anyone that was ever offended by the stuff that we're told is so offensive now?
Of course not. Nobody.
It's a form of mind control as well as altering the language. I mean, this is mind control, right?
Yeah, for sure. They create a culture of self-censorship too, where you're afraid before you say something. Of course, you should probably think about what you say before you say it. Of course, I am guilty of not doing that from time to time, but that's okay. But they want to get people so wrapped up in everything they say. God forbid they say something that might offend somebody in the audience or somebody sitting next to them at a restaurant or something. I got to be honest with you. That's not my responsibility. If you're offended by what I say, that's your problem, not mine. I'm not screaming fire in a movie theater. I'm not screaming racial slurs. I'm not talking to you. If you overhear what I'm saying and you're offended by it, then my response is going to be quite deliberate, and it will be, then get away from me. If you don't want to hear what I say, don't listen to me. It's very easy. Whatever happened to this? Whatever happened to this option of people going to a comedy club and they're totally offended. Oh, I can't believe the comic said this. You do realize you went to a comedy club, right? It's 18 and over. That's the part of the deal. You prepare to be offended. We're getting to the point now where you've got Kevin Hart saying, well, listen, I said some bad things a couple years ago. They asked me to apologize. I've already apologized about them for years and years ago. They want me to apologize again. And I said no. And I thought, good for him. Who needs this sort of headache? Who needs that sort of nonsense? That the thought police are out there, making sure that everybody's behaving. Dude, I don't want people to behave. That's no fun.
It's the thought police. That's what it's all about, because I'm sure Charlie would agree with me here. I won't put words in his mouth, but I've got absolutely nothing against people's lifestyles or what they get up to. That's not the point here. It's the way that the media and the powers that be are weaponizing it and telling us that it's so offensive, everyone's offended. And what's more dangerous, we've had a bit of a laugh with it, but I think it's quite dangerous. And this is where I really think we need to start drawing the line. And it's the fact that we've got children, boys in particular, to be told that boys have periods too. That's okay, Charlie. And this is to be taught to school children. I mean, God damn it, let kids be kids,
This is madness. This has turned into The Onion. I look at, online at the news organizations on their websites or the nightly news, which I watch just to kind of get an idea of what's being said. I'm not gathering information from there necessarily, just to see the insanity of it, really, just to watch the circus, as George Carlin says. And I feel like half the time I'm like, they're putting me on, right? This is a joke. This can't possibly be a real thing. And then you read the headline that says, boys can have periods too, children to be taught in latest victory for transgender campaigners. What victory is this? I'm trying to understand what the victory is for transgender.
I don't ever remember seeing any protests outside my son's school or hearing about any protests to get this to be a thing in the first place. This is bad, man. And in Scotland, that they're going to be teaching, or they're talking about, they haven't passed it into law yet, but at 5 years old, when you start school, you'll choose your own gender. Again, look, what people get up to when they're adults, hey, it's all good. That's not my point. But kids, Charlie, this is wrong, man.
It's crazy. I would have a question for these school administrators that have launched this campaign. Who is funding you? Who is making you do this? Because this is an abnormal. This is an abnormal agenda. Now, and I've said this before, and I will say it again. I have a ton of empathy for transgendered people. It's got to be a confusing world, and it probably started way sooner than most people realize, and it's got to be difficult. And I'm not trying to minimize that or minimize the fact that they're going through, they have stress. I mean, a normal, regular, so to speak, person has a hard time coming up through school anyway. It's tough enough being a kid, but then you throw this on top of it. It's got to be very difficult. But what is the victory for transgendered people? To teach boys that they can have periods too. I don't understand how that accomplishes anything except muddying the waters, infusing a straight out lie into this narrative, and having teachers teach it like it's a real thing. So then I'm curious what the teachers think about this, because there's got to be some of them that are just shaking their heads going, I didn't sign up for this. I thought I was going to be teaching math, and now I'm teaching that boys can have periods. I mean, I'm sorry, but this is. You want to talk about fake news? This is some fake news right here. And then the fact that the Telegraph picks up on it like this is some social evolution. Like, this is not an evolution. This is a devolution. This is we're going backwards here, because now we can just say whatever we want, and if it's printed in the media, then it's the facts. I mean, and I would like for a doctor to come out and explain this, because this had to have come from some doctor. I'd like for them to say, this is where we found biologically that that you're a boy and you can have a period. Imagine the surprise when this boy is sitting around waiting and waiting and waiting. He's in his mid-40s. He's still waiting for it. He's going to be waiting a long time, because it's a biological fact that it can't happen for them. I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor. I don't think I really need to understand that. But this is madness. And the Telegraph is going to put this in their news in their newspaper or online and march this out there like it's a real thing, and then criticize people like us for being fake news. Oh my God, this is maddening. This is insanity. I feel like the only way that this news article works is if it comes from The Onion, and then it's hilarious. But if it's serious, like the Telegraph has put out, I mean, this is got to stop. This is insanity.
And I mean, comedians would be now, in this present culture and climate, scared to talk openly about this at some kind of gig they do. If they're going around universities or pubs or stuff like that. And they run the risk of getting banned from even talking, dude.
Well, I did Sam Tripoli's show in LA a couple weeks ago, and we talked about that. I asked him if he does comedy, if he ever does college campuses, and he said, "Hell no, I never do college campuses," because it's like it's an audience that is automatically they start off against you. You know, they start off just waiting to just attack you on something. So he's like, there's no fun, there's no point in it. Everything you say is scrutinized. You don't get to pass anything off as just being a comedian. It's this is a weird, yeah. Comedians talking about this. Actually, you know what? If a comedian brought this up and it hadn't been in the news and they were talking about how they thought that this was what was going to happen, I don't even think people would laugh all that much because it sounds so stupid and like such a non-idea that they might think that it was kind of, the guy was just trying to be, silly. But the fact that it's actually happening now, a comedian could bring this up and could bash it all day long. And there'd be people in the audience that would be like, I'm offended by this. Well, good for you. Be offended, but be offended somewhere else. We don't have the time for this nonsense. It's crazy. It's what it's doing is it's creating self-censorship and it's stifling conversations about real issues. And then in its place, they're putting up fake issues like, should we teach that boys have periods? Why are we even having this conversation? Why is this even a topic for the Telegraph? Like, how dare you put this out there? It's really annoying. Frankly, it's insulting to our intelligence, and it is not making us more socially aware. And it's not making us, more compassionate. It's just making us mad. It's ridiculous these days. Or whether a song, hey, we're going to take this Christmas song off because it's offensive. Give me a break. Have you not listened to like everything that's on the radio these days? Everything is a lot darker than this. So I don't. I feel like it's just busy work for us.
I can't think of one argument for all of these changes, especially when it's the ones with the school 5-year-olds and the one with the periods for boys. I just can't think of one positive argument for a case to be made for this to be a thing. I just can't. And that's why it should be so glaringly obvious to parents. And I imagine, I can't say I know, but I would imagine that statistically close to 100% of people listening to this show will be agreeing with us, Charlie, because there's a bigger agenda here. Like you say, the weaponization of language. Even Orwell didn't go this far when he was writing 1984. And I often call it bizarro land, upside down land. How ridiculous are things going to get? Because I still fear this is only the start.
Well, I think it is. And I think Orwell didn't put it in his books because he'd probably look at him and, nah, they would never go that far. I want this book to be scary, but a little bit more believable than this.
Christmas time, it's cold outside. That song's banned now.
Oh, yeah.
Well, how far does it go? Does it get to the point where we just can't talk about anything and we all just become like genderless kind of drones?
Yeah, they would prefer that, I think. Or we just chase our tails on topics that have no real they're really not that important. If you went by the amount of times in like the Huffington Post and online news platforms, how often they talk about transgendered and non-binary and all these genders, you would be, if you just got off the boat and started learning about your culture by reading the news, you would think that this was like an epidemic. You would think that 30% of the population were transgendered or non-binary or by whatever. It's like it's like a tenth of 1%. I don't understand why it's such a big topic of conversation, because the amount of time that we, meaning society, spends talking about this is time that could be better spent talking about, I don't know, why we're still in Afghanistan, why we're still in Iraq, why we hate Russia so much, why we're trying to regime change in Venezuela. I mean, all these things that are like really important actual events that have something to do with, might impact our lives. We're not talking about those because we have to talk about whether or not a 5-year-old can pick their gender when they start kindergarten. I mean, it's madness and it's total. I think it's a distraction. I mean, I seriously hope it's a distraction.
Oh, dude. So glad you said that, right? Because along with the weaponization of language, which we could do a whole show on, the way that they're changing the English language, But think of it this way as well, folks. Divide and conquer. It's how the few have always controlled the many. And it used to be on a kind of macro scale where it'd be empire against empire, nation against nation. But now they're literally dividing us right down to not just men and women, but another 45 categories as well. And Charlie's right, because all that does is it distracts us and it causes infighting. And that's how they're able to get away with all of the stuff like transporting all of the drugs from Afghanistan. And don't say that's me making stuff up, because if you look at it, before the Afghan invasion and chasing bin Laden, you know, Tim Osman, the ex-CIA kind of guy that was working against the Mujahideen, there was like really, really little heroin coming out of that country. The Taliban were burning poppy fields, and admittedly, yeah, they kept a few, absolutely. But then roll on a few years, British, American coalition of the killing in there, lots of collateral damage later, and you've got all these farmers growing poppies, and the output from Afghanistan, one of the most occupied countries in the world where you would expect borders are tight, right? They're all riding about on horseback, really kind of primitive place, medieval dark ages, they make you believe. Yet all of this heroin is making its way around the world. They've got a better kind of export business going on there than Amazon. How do they do that, Charlie? Jeff Bezos must model Amazon on the drug trade coming out of Afghanistan.
Well, they have an excellent distribution network.
All from a cave.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All from a cave. Yeah, I forgot about that. Well, what Amazon doesn't have, that NATO does have, are air bases all over the world. So what Amazon needs to do is create their own airports, and then they can export or import whatever they want, just like the CIA does through those NATO air bases. This is not some conspiracy theory about running opium out of the poppy fields in Afghanistan and things like that. This has been going on for hundreds of years. This is how empires finance themselves. It's no different from what the British have done. They did it in the opium wars in Asia. Japan used the opium trade to get the Chinese hooked on it and extort them and put them into a bad situation. I mean, this has been going on for a long. The CIA did it in Vietnam, running opium out of the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia in the bodies and body bags of dead American soldiers, by the way. If you think that sounds like a far-fetched idea, look it up. It's been well documented. How many CIA planes have to crash with hundreds of kilos of cocaine before people start to understand that maybe the CIA is running cocaine? Because they are. I mean, they made a movie about it, American Made, with Tom Cruise. They didn't get into the whole Bill Clinton connection, but they did happen to show that it was being flown into Mena, Arkansas, and that this guy was working, as a contract pilot for the CIA.
Yeah, and I've had Chip Tatum on the show.
Oh, you've had him on? Oh, wow.
I've had him on a couple of times, and that's literally the dude who was on here talking about flying said drugs into Arkansas. And when I asked him, how many people have you roughly, come on, can you tell me if you've done people in? And he just cool and calmly said 17. We moved on. It's the most kind of profound moment in radio I think I've had. It was chilling, but what brilliant information. And imagine having the bravery to come out and talk about that.
Well, yeah.
The world, Charlie. That's the real world.
The real world is a dark place where you have to understand that the CIA runs the drug trafficking. We have the death of George H.W. Bush, and he, sat there at his desk on camera holding up this bag of cocaine saying, this was crack cocaine. It was purchased in a park across from the White House. Yeah, because you brought it in, you hypocrite. I mean, this was a lesson for people lately. People that I've talked to lately, with the whole George H.W. Bush funeral and how everyone was so, he was such a good guy. He was the last of the great, calm, peaceful presidents. I mean, oh my God, give me a break. This is the
parallel universe, Charlie.
Parallel universe for sure. Yeah, where George H.W. Bush wasn't running cocaine in through the CIA, continuing it on and on and on.
Quickly before we go to the break, right? And I want to leave it as a cliffhanger. I mean, 30 seconds. Something happened at that funeral, didn't it? Something strange.
Yes, it did. And there's videos of it to prove it. We don't know exactly what it was, but we do know something happened there. We'll get into that when we get back from the break.
Absolutely. You're listening to Charlie Robinson, author of The Octopus of Global Control. He's got a page over on Facebook. You can check him out there. Same name, Octopus of Global Control. And of course, you can get the book, which is over 500 quotes that breaks down everything you need to know, past, present, and moving into the future to do with the New World Order. We're going to be back on the other side for more with Charlie. You don't want to miss this, folks. We're going to break down everything that's going on, and you'll want to hear it right here on TFRlive.com. Don't go anywhere.
Times are changing. The circus of politics, healthcare's low standards and high prices, and let's not forget food quality. What to do? Arm yourself with Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. In a world of chemical imbalance and poor air and water quality, it's time you make a move. Log on to GetTheTea.com and stock up on organic non-GMO supplements. Don't forget the tea. Cleansing your body never felt so good. And we have a brand new tea called Takedown Tea, which helps support healthy glucose. All natural body support so you can be at your best, naturally. All you have to do is log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. We're not a fad that comes and goes. We are the real deal. Join us and armor up. GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Changing America's health one tea bag at a time. Times are changing. The circus of politics.
That was quick. We're back. I'm Kev Baker. I'm joined by the author of The Octopus of Global Control. He's a good man. He's funny. He's got all the information. His name is Charlie Robinson, and we're going to move on now into more topics. And before I do that, though, I want to give a big shout out to all of our listeners down in London. And I know for a fact we do have listeners in London. And let me just say to you, right, it's probably, I hope you stayed in today. If you can stay in tomorrow. Now, why am I saying that, right? Because, well, London, it's the most surveilled city on the best of days, right? I've been down there, and I mean, I live in a smart city, but nothing compares to London when it comes to an Orwellian surveillance system. But it's about to get, and it is getting right now as we speak, a whole lot worse, because they are trialing something new down in London. Like I say, it's on today, it's on tomorrow, and this is the latest in facial recognition. Now then, Charlie, talk about Orwell's 1984. And like I say, I'm not sure if you've ever been over to this side of the pond to London, but even coming from a city like Glasgow, I was really shocked. It was noticeable how much more surveillance there was in the capital, especially the closer you got to the city and near that kind of that lair for the lizards. I mean, the royal family, Buckingham Palace. But it's about to get worse, right?
Well, I have been to London, but it was before all of the surveillance kicked in, so it was a while ago. But there's a great headline that says, London begins testing facial recognition in public despite being, quote, staggeringly inaccurate. So don't let that stop you. So what they're doing is they're rolling out a trial of a facial recognition equipment at Notting Hill Carnival. It resulted in roughly 35 false matches and an erroneous arrest. The system only produced a single accurate match during the course of Carnival, but the individual had already been processed by the justice system between the time the police compiled the suspect database and deployed it. So this is like beta testing, of course, but this is a product that is nowhere near being ready for the big time. But don't let that stop them. Of course, they're just going to go ahead and roll it out as if it's 100% accurate, no flaws in it. This is Minority Report. So this is less, I mean, yeah, it's George Orwell, but this is more Philip K. Dick now we're getting into, because we're starting to see the facial recognition tied into pre-crime, which sounded preposterous when you watched the movie or read the book Minority Report, and now when you see it being trotted out as being an actual thing, it just is terrifying, frankly. But the fact that the system is so inaccurate is really scary, because they can treat it as if it's as if everything that the matches that are coming out are legitimate, and that your face has been tied to somebody else's face that was involved in an armed robbery somewhere. And next thing you know, you're in jail with no bail, waiting this thing out. And then it turns out, oh, well, actually our program doesn't work very well. So I guess we had the wrong guy, so we'll let you out. Meanwhile, you've been in there eating bologna sandwiches and trying to not get shanked, and your whole life is screwed up because of it. And I know I'm kind of goofing on it, but this has happened to people. I mean, and it's going to be happening from here on out.
This is the thing, because for those that don't fall foul to this, it's going to be quite amusing, right? How rubbish this thing really is when you look at the numbers there. But for those who are affected by it, another reality altogether. Could lose their jobs. It could take them months, maybe years, if ever, to get back to normal, right? Worst case scenario. However, let's step back and look at the technological side of this, because we all know here that I'm a bit of a geek. And, you know, when you think about this, this is quite worrying, because this means they're really close to rolling this out, because this is AI, facial recognition, and it's to be expected that it's going to be crap to start with, right? But don't let that encourage you, because remember everything we've learned about AI on here. It starts to go out into the real world and get trained on real data sets, as opposed to humans in the lab with it kind of been no connection to the internet. They're just training it by hand. Well, that means now they're one step closer to putting it out there. And, you know, all these errors that it makes, Charlie, and that one there that you cited is a perfect example. Guy had already been through the system, but, you know, it hadn't been on file yet or whatever. And that's something that's going to learn from, and it's going to learn from all the other mistakes it's made. And then look how quickly ones like Google's AlphaGo learns how to play chess, the ancient Chinese game of Go, to the point where it can beat absolute grandmasters at both games, comes up with moves that are never seen. You know, one in a generation move at that Chinese game Go. So think how quick facial recognition is going to learn from that little test that they done at the Notting Hill Carnival.
Well,
it's priceless, isn't it?
It is going to get better. Here's another clip from it. It says, the campaign group obtained statistics using Freedom of Information requests in May that exposed the Met's facial recognition matches as 98% inaccurate. But new police figures obtained by Big Brother Watch reveal that 100% of the Met's facial recognition matches since May have incorrectly matched innocent members of the public with people on police watch lists. And on top of that, they take the photos and they're stored on police databases for 1 month nonetheless. So they're compiling pictures of people. Like you said, the system is teaching itself in a real way, in real time, with these real people that are wandering around, have no idea about it because they didn't mention it to people, which is illegal. But, you know, don't let that bother. You know, I'm sure it was just an oversight. So they're setting this up in a way to use.
Charlie, I'm just sitting here thinking, I hope Anne's got me a Groucho Marx kind of mask with a big nose and a whistle for Christmas. Just go to the shop safely and look kind of incognito to the cameras anyway.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, then someone else can just put one on and then commit a crime and then just blame you for it. Because they'll be like, it's that Kev again with his Groucho Marx outfit.
You see, you have to laugh at this, right? But, I mean, you're saying that, I mean, this is another thing you can get into as well, folks, because they've got all this CCTV stuff like that. We know that hackers, they always find their ways around the latest and greatest systems, right? And people in our situation, let's say Charlie, you know, something comes along and somebody reads his book and goes, whoa, you know, I don't like the fact he's putting all that information out there. Or I mistakenly take somebody onto the show who really gets all of us in trouble, you know, some whistleblower, something they shouldn't be talking about. And they want to set us up, basically. You know, there's that thing, deep fake technology, Charlie. You could appear in any kind of CCTV feed and it would even convince both of us that it was real.
Yes, I've seen those.
That's worrying, man.
I've seen that goes back to the Bill Clinton quote that I don't believe, you know, I've seen talking about the guy who was changing the light bulbs. The guy saying, "Well, those TV, I never trust those TV people. They can make they can make it look real." And Bill Clinton was going, "Yeah, I think that guy was ahead of his time." Well, yeah, I've seen the videos. I've seen the videos where they have a program that makes it look like George W. Bush was saying something that he wasn't saying. In that case, they had him saying something intelligent, which was the tip that you knew it wasn't really him. But they have created a system where, yeah, you could pass up. There's no way you could ever explain your way out of it. It looks like you. It's a video of someone that looks exactly like you speaking words that you've never said, but it's got your mouth moving and it's a dead ringer for you. And yeah, that technology is out there. God forbid they decide that they have it out for you. They can just take one of your pictures, one of your old pictures, and stick it in one of these facial recognition software programs and frame you for some crime. And it'd be you up against technology. And, the burden of proof would somehow switch. Instead of being on them to prove you guilty, it would be on you to not only prove that you were innocent, but to prove that you were innocent because this new technology is faulty and that they've rigged it in a way to fit their needs. And if their needs happen to be that they want to frame somebody, well, they can do it. And it's not as if police don't frame people all the time. Just go to the prison system and ask the black community how many times a white cop has dropped a bag of cocaine in the backseat of their car and said, "You look like you might have been a drug trafficker," and it's their word against the cops. So. If we look at these systems like we're laughing about it now because it doesn't affect us and it's kind of in this raw form, but this is only going to get better. And as it gets better, it's going to get scarier and the implications are going to be far reaching and it'll affect all of us.
Oh, absolutely, dude. And all this CCTV as well, it ties into something else that you want to address tonight. And I'm glad you want to address it because this is a topic that I think you can't talk enough about because more and more people really need to appreciate this. And it's, stuff that we're doing on CCTV over here in Glasgow and most cities around the UK. It's not just a smart city thing, but we've got people that dress up really, really similar to the police, but they're absolutely not police. They're like glorified security guards. And what they do, Charlie, is they watch for people dropping cigarette ends, bit of rubbish, just absolutely insane things. And they're able to write you fines on the spot. And if you cause any trouble or shout at them or look at them the wrong way, they radio right through to the police and the real police come through, right? So you've got to stand there like a good little citizen and take your £60 fine. And I'm not saying, we should all be going about littering things or stuff like that. But, in the near future, especially in a smart city, it's not going to be people coming up to you in the street. You're probably going to get an alert on your mobile phone and it's going to tell you that you've just violated some city policy. And as opposed to it being some kind of financial burden that you're left with, they're going to take points off you. Social credit points. This is where we're going, isn't it?
This is where we're going. And China is leading the way. They have a social credit system in place now. It's getting better. It's not fully functional at this point, but it is definitely, it's as much of in the beta mode as these other facial recognition programs that are going on around the country. But this is tied to a social credit system that basically ranks you as a citizen of China in this particular case. But of course, I think we can all understand it will spread, and the spreading has already begun. But your credit score, your social credit score, will be similar to like your financial credit score, meaning it'll be a fluid score that is constantly improving or declining based on your actions. And it will be used for a variety of things. It will be used to reward people that are obedient to the state, and it will be used to punish people that are not. And part of the punishments that they have rolled out and they have laid out in their rules and their the implications of this program is that you won't be able to fly. You won't be able to get on a train if your score is too low. Think about that for a second. So you're talking about limiting your ability to move freely around the country. Now, nobody's going to accuse China of being a free society. I've been there a couple times. It's cool, but it's a little weird, and you can definitely tell that there are some aspects of it that are authoritarian. But as a tourist or somebody that was just there like I was on business a couple times, it didn't really impact me, so I didn't really give it all that much thought. But now looking at it, because I see this as the blueprint for what's coming around the world, if the people in charge have it their way, this social credit system is very dangerous, because this gets into this becomes an issue where if you are associating with somebody that has a low credit score, but yours is high, then it starts to drag you down. So now it makes you just make decisions about, well, I'm not going to hang out with that guy because that guy's a conspiracy theorist. I'm not going to go on Kev's show because, God forbid, if Kev says something wrong and I'm associated with him, then my score goes down too. And I can't have my score go down because I have to get on an airplane next week to go to a business meeting. So all these really crazy things that were never issues before start to impact and start to become a reality. And then you start to self-censor yourself just so that because you're constantly thinking about your score. The people in the United States, the people running the United States would love to have this program in place, because then they could silence dissent immediately. Not to mention, they could tie this to who you're voting for. They'll know who you vote for. And if you get out of line, they'll turn off your access to your bank accounts and things like that. I don't know why that wouldn't be the next step of this, because it's certainly going that way. And China, like anything technological, is leading the way on some of these things, and not all of them are in the best interest of the people.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And, you take this further, we talk about the robots taking over jobs, but AI itself, no need for a robot to be carrying it around, because, if I was to write a book about our road towards the Borg, Charlie, shall we call it, right? I would say, well, the next step on from this is you take away the kind of civil servants, the people pushing the paper, the local councillor for the local council, stuff like that. AI in there, right? So a lot more quick. It can work 24/7. Don't have to pay it any money. There's a real case to be made for that. And then you go one step further, right? How about we just get rid of the councillors and everything? Because we see how they're always involved in corruption scandals and stuff like this. And the media being controlled, I always have to wonder, well, why do we even find out when these people are meant to be in trouble? And I think further down the line, there's going to be one of these protests like we were talking about earlier, where we need to get rid of political parties. And this is how you rapidly see how AI could start taking over running the planet. And then, just to put a kind of funny slant on it, maybe it'll be like reality TV. We can vote for like figureheads that'll go to the G20 and get pissed and offend everyone.
I would vote for Nigel Farage, because he called Herman Van Rompuy said he had the personality of a wet rag, and I thought that was the greatest insult I had ever heard. And
isn't that man's name? Herman Van Rompuy. I'm gonna laugh at us, folks.
You just go, who are you? I've never heard of you before.
And then you've got that clown Juncker. I mean, look at him. Yeah. Now, he comes from the Nazi family, right, that made all the money making the weapons. But not only that, if you see him any time after 1 p.m, the guy's absolutely pissed out. He's not. He's drinking from the minute he gets up till the minute he has his first kind of bit of caviar, a nice prawn vol au, go to a little meeting, play a game of golf, grope somebody, offend somebody. It's a joke, dude.
Yeah, well, he actually came out. I saw this I don't know when it actually happened. I saw it a couple months ago. The video of him talking about how the people from the other planets are very concerned about our behavior. And you can see the people behind him are all looking at each other like, what is he talking about? It's like, it's just him being drunk again.
There's videos for people out there who might think we're just kind of making crazy ad hominem attacks on the unelected head of the EU. Go and type in Juncker drunk. There's many a video you can see. One, they actually have to be holding him up, Charlie. There's a bodyguard on either side of him. Macron calls them over, and they're actually propping the dude up. It's ridiculous. I
saw that. There's a video of him, and it's like Weekend at Bernie's. They're almost dragging him to this group picture, and they're like, "Oh, he had foot surgery, so he's having a hard time." He had foot surgery again, because every time I see him, he's wasted. And yes, this is not an ad hominem attack. I'm not above doing that. Don't get me wrong, but in this particular case, this is 100% legit. The guy, I mean, they don't call him drunker for nothing. I mean, the guy has a problem with alcohol. He should get some help. But it's probably the people from the other planets giving him a hard time. It's causing him to drink so much.
And of course, we're still waiting for Brexit. We spoke about it last time. Mm-hmm. I came across a post today, and if I may, I want to take just maybe 1 minute to share this, because we hear about this Brexit going on over here, and I've got to take this post at face value. It claims to be from an expat living in the Netherlands. It says, I asked somebody to post this earlier, but I haven't seen it. So, news just in from Holland. I wish the Brits would take the time to see what's going on here. I'm a Scouser, that's somebody from Liverpool, living in Holland, getting on 40 years now. It's just as bad, in some ways worse than in the UK. For example, health insurance is compulsory, whether working or unemployed. My wife and I pay €250 per month, and that is basic. No dentals, physios, or extras. 2 major hospitals have shut down. There are no beds. The accident and emergency is the same as the UK. Families are asked to look after their parents because the shortages in care. The immigration problem is a laughingstock. Food banks are not coping. People in work are not making ends meet and relying on food banks. Belgium, Germany, France, they all have the same problems. Merkel is stepping down as Prime Minister, Chancellor, but has forgot to tell everyone she has a secure high position in Brussels. Why would you want to be a member of a gang of pocket-filling thieves who do not care about their people? As for Juncker, well, just don't get me started there. The EU countries are crumbling, and no, can't say that word, gives a dangle-do-dandy. So get out while you can, and maybe others will follow suit. They are scaring and flexing their muscles and hoping that it will turn around, because the membership fees that the UK puts in every year will have to be put up by the remaining countries. Holland will have to double their fee, we've been told. What other countries can afford this? Spain, Greece, Italy, they're all bankrupt. So see, the EU does not want to lose the UK and will bully any way to try and win it over by threatening the Northern Ireland deal, the fishing deal, giving back Gibraltar, and whatever else they can get their grubby hands on. So don't be fooled. It's not a bed of roses. Things are bad here, and like I said, in some matters, it's worse. The riots in France are not just about fuel tax. It's about living standards. Belgium and Holland have also taken up the baton with the yellow vest demonstrators because they're tired of it. Take the time to find out yourselves, then you will be glad of Brexit. And like I've said, with sense, Holland will follow suit. I have also a very good and close friend who I have shared a business interest based in France. He has lived there for 15 years and is now looking to relocate his family and business here in the UK. There you go. Just make your own minds up. Now, like I say, I can't confirm or deny if that's genuine. It might be, a pro-Brexit person that's posted that. Propaganda campaigns are flying. But I think if we were to speak to people across Europe, this EU model, it is failing, and it has failed. Countries been bankrupted under it for a start. That's no use, folks. That's something that's broken. So, it might be hard. Who knows? Probably won't be as hard as we're told. We voted for Brexit, and we need to get out. And if it is the start, that domino effect, just think of that. Bringing down something that was the idea of Adolf Hitler. Something that Tony Blair, a war criminal, wants us to stay in. Something that George Soros can't get enough of. Just remember what side you're on if you want Brexit or not. Because we really can put an end to this, Charlie. And it's ridiculous, dude.
You don't even have to know the ins and outs of it. All you need to know is that Tony Blair wants the EU, and so does George Soros. And therefore, I want the exact opposite of whatever those two maniacs are pushing for.
Well, there's somebody in the chat room, Lynn. And I was hoping Lynn would be in there tonight because she is an expat over there in Holland, Charlie, the Netherlands. Capital letters, Kev, it is so true. I live here, and every word is true. It's broken, dude. It's crazy, but we know, and your book in particular pays attention to the fact this New World Order, of which an EU superstate is a major part, it's been an idea long in the making, right? And they're going to hang on tooth and nail to what they've got right now. Because that money, for a start, and the control, Charlie, it's all about control.
Yeah, and they, you want to see the weakest link in the chain is obviously Greece. And Greece got their acceptance into the EU based on recooking their debt books with the help of Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs came in and gave them currency default swaps that made their debt look a lot less than it was, because at the current rate, they weren't going to be eligible for exception into the EU. But after Goldman Sachs got a hold of them, what a surprise! Their debt looked a whole lot better based on these tricks that they had put in place, and so then they gained their entrance into the EU. And then, of course, who was the banking establishment that was set up to pick through Greece once it was saddled with a tremendous amount of debt? Well, Goldman Sachs was brought in, of course, and they're selling off the ports, airports, islands, and anything of value to their buddies at pennies on the dollar, or whatever a fraction of a drachma is. And then everyone in Greece is now saddled with 40% more debt than they had when the whole crisis started, even though they've had all these austerity measures. And the last time I checked, they were on the 13th version of the austerity measures for, taxing everything. It was like your self-employed tax was 100% in Greece. So what do you think you're going to get? You're going to get a bunch of self-employed people leaving. So they gutted this country just to pilfer all the money and all the tangible assets out of it, which is what the central banks and the Goldman Sachs crew does. And that's part of the EU. So they're going to drag everyone else down. So even if it was built on some noble idea and some rock solid business plan, you've allowed somebody into your club that is insolvent and can't pay their bills. And so you give them more debt because that solves the problem, and then act surprised when they're still causing bigger issues. The EU is a disaster. Everyone needs to get out of that agreement as fast as they can, because that is the goal. That is the New World Order blueprint right there. They want to do the EU because it's easier to control one organizational group than it is to control 30 or so countries. You just have to compromise one guy, not everybody. So it works a lot easier for them.
And it would appear that unlike us Brits, the French, they don't wait for a vote. Macron, he must be like in his safe room in the palace by now, on the phone to the Rothschilds and his granny. I mean, his wife. They really, really are going for it over there, aren't they? But I tell you something that's no laughing matter is some of the scenes, some of the injuries that were sustained by the Yellow Vest protesters at the weekend. And since these protests have begun, I've seen photographs of injuries that appear less harmful to the individuals involved. And we've gone basically and launched airstrikes on the back of them. Think of somewhere like Syria, Assad, if he was doing this to his people at the weekends. Imagine if Putin was doing it to Russians over in Moscow. There would be outcry, wouldn't there? But there's hardly even anything in the news. So determined are they to really keep this EU together. We'll discuss more of this on the other side. And, of course, with Charlie being here, lots of woo to come too. So please join us after these short messages for hour number 2. We'll be right back.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Hour number 2, ladies and gentlemen, with our very special guest here tonight, Charlie Robinson. The man he has wrote the book called The Octopus of Global Control. Now, he's got a Facebook page, The Octopus of Global Control, funnily enough. You can follow him over at Twitter as well. And Charlie, where can people get a hold of your book, sir?
You can buy it from the evil Jeff Bezos on Amazon as a Kindle and a paperback. But if you like some company that has less tentacles, then BarnesandNoble.com has it as well as a paperback and an ebook there.
Awesome stuff. And before we get launched right back into this, social credit systems, all that kind of nonsense that's coming our way, let me just take a brief moment to remind you, don't go anywhere. Didn't touch that dial, as Whistles would say, after the show, because Quantum Connections will be on live. And it's a bit of a kind of shake-up tonight, because Lucky's going to be there. And instead of Dr. Brooks Agnew, the very brilliant Brent Thomas from Paranormal Portal, He is going to be joining Lucky to give you all of your quantum connections after the Kev Baker Show. So then, Charlie, I was mentioning these crazy credit social scoring system thingy-majiggies, whatever name they want to put on it. Google controlling us, right? Something like that. We'll just call it that. You know, it's not just China, and you see it's starting to kind of spread around the world, isn't it?
Well, James Corbett from CorbettReport.com wrote a brilliant article today. I found it on Steam, and I'm sure it's available other places, talking about how Venezuela has reached out to the Chinese government and asked them to come in and help them set up the system. And in order to do that, what they're doing is they're creating a new ID card that will track a wide range of information, from their medical records to their political affiliations to their social media presence. What a surprise. And all that information is then funneled straight back to the government. So they call this is going to get you the English translation of this new program is called the Fatherland Card. So if that isn't like a nod to Adolf Hitler, I don't know what is. But this is definitely, you talk about the EU trying to control people and get them into big groups. If Adolf Hitler had access to one of these social credit system databases and new ID cards, national ID cards that connected to a database of information, I believe this would have been his wet dream for sure.
Absolutely, dude. And you know, Facebook, it's going to tie in with all of these systems as well. I seen a story about this the other day. We covered it, but I mean, how much creepier can they get when they've got patents to literally predict where you're going to be next just by looking at, you know, your previous locations, who you're with, stuff like that. I mean, think about what they are. It's Facebook. It's where we were told we could go and share, you know, stuff we get up to with family and friends, and we could all keep up to date and things. Come on, folks. Surely everyone can see now that this has got to be the greatest data mining operation in history in the time of big data anyway, Charlie. And it's absolutely, you know, government controlled. This is a tool of control.
Yeah, imagine if all of a sudden Facebook sent an email to the police saying, you know, we believe that based on his social media profile, that this guy is going to go axe murder his entire family right now. I mean, they would just be making this up. I mean, there's no way to predict what somebody's going to do based on their social media platform, unless they come right out and say, I plan to go to a country western festival and shoot up the crowd, or I'm going to a country bar and I'm going to shoot everyone in there. Of course, when you see that doesn't remind anyone of a real person saying that. That sounds like a setup to me, but that's beside the point. But yeah, Facebook, who has a history of being a little bit loose with their data, it always seems to get either pilfered by outside people or given to some of the creators of apps when they shouldn't have access to it. I don't know how much of that stuff is accidental. I think that's probably happening all the time. And then once it gets found out, then they say, oh, it was a breach. It was an accident. I don't know if they're selling them in the UK, but here on TV ads, every other commercial, it seems like, is an ad for Facebook Portal, which is like an iPad for, you need two of them, sort of like fax machines, I guess. But it's really no different from an iPad, except you place it in this little cradle and it follows you around as you're having a conversation with somebody on the, who also has one. Why would you let Facebook have access to that? That's like the same reason I wonder about Alexa. People are like, oh, Alexa, order me a new box of Kleenex from Amazon. Oh, by the way, let's just allow Amazon to capture every conversation we're having in our house. What could possibly go wrong there? So this is
who doubts that? I mean, they've actually used evidence in court cases now where it's actually captured crimes being committed, stored on server, and no need for you to say Alexa for it to be listening to you. Think about that. The fact it can hear you saying Alexa means it's already listening, folks. And I know this audience know that. I always got to hope there's somebody out there, though, just new coming across this. And like you say, Charlie, Facebook's got it. And this is the way it's going. I remember when I first started listening to Alex Jones, he talked about a council program over here, social services or something. and it was they were trialing putting CCTV inside like sheltered housing. And I was thinking to myself, right, there's always one step too far, right? We might not have installed CCTV cameras, but we've invited Trojan horses into our house like Facebook. They wouldn't be wanting to watch us, right?
Right. No, of course not. And I realize that I'm a hypocrite by saying that I have a Facebook page and that I use that. And criticizing Bezos and then selling my book on Amazon. Believe me, everyone can save the messages. I get it. But that's the dilemma. I'm no different from a lot of people that have the same sort of problem. It's like on the one hand, these are the tools at your disposal to get the word out about what you're doing, whether it's your podcast or whether it's your book you've written or whether it's whatever, your business, doing selling widgets. These are your options and you want to use them. But at the same time, those of us that have sort of started to dig into this and get a handle of what's really going on, we see what is happening behind the scenes and it's horrifying. So you're in this dilemma between, acknowledging that you are contributing to this problem by using these platforms, that you and I are both contributing to this problem, and yet we're in a position where we're having our voices heard by people, where we're criticizing those platforms at the same time, and it creates this hypocrisy. And it's frustrating because we know we're doing it. It's the worst thing you can do is to be a hypocrite, and yet we're stuck. And it sucks to be there because I want to have a different version. I'd like for there to be a different place besides Amazon. I don't like what they stand for. I don't like the direction they're going. I don't like that Jeff Bezos has a huge deal with the CIA and he has cloud computing software that is doing God knows what. I don't like any of that stuff. But at the same time, I wrote a book and I'd like to sell it so that I can write a second book and a third book. And so I have to use this platform. And that's the dilemma. And it makes people sick. It makes me sick. I know. And I know it makes you sick as well.
Oh, dude, my trolls, they like to call me Kev Baker, faker. That's kind of snappy. I get that. But it'd be more accurate, right, to call me Kev Baker, hypocrite. Because you've seen me online gaming. I dive into some aspects of this Matrix feet first. I love it, dude. The technology, being a geek. But at the same time, like you say, I see the flip side of all of that as well. And definitely, I think, we're all kind of hypocritical in one kind of respect when it comes to that, because we are. I watch the chat room, I see people commenting, and I think we're all kind of on the same page when it comes to what the technology is going to be used for. But there we are, usually using the technology to make said comments. So it's the world we live in. And like you say, that's the tools that we have to use. And, the ultimate hypocrisy, I think, maybe that I try and get away with is we talk about HAARP and things like that on here, Charlie, right? That thing up in Alaska where they say they can control the weather. But they also say that it can, help the military with over-the-horizon communications. Well, I was a signaller in the army. And, unbeknown to me, I probably utilized what HAARP was doing at the time. So here I am telling everyone what the dangers of HAARP and what they're doing with it. Yeah, I took advantage of it for my job at one point. It's crazy.
Yeah, we all have. And I can't stop talking about how crooked and dirty the central bank is and the Federal Reserve, and yet I have dollars in my bank account. You know what I mean? So I get it. It's
Talk
a frustration.
To me about that for a little minute, because Gerald Celente coming on Thursday, he'll be talking about the White Shoe Boys. And yes. The kind of, you have a bit in your book even talking about New York bankers, stuff like that. I mean, you can look back to the heyday in the 80s over here in London when we're talking about yuppies and people had the mobile phones in a suitcase and things. But it's crazy, all these bankers, what they used to get up to and what they're still getting up to today, right?
Oh, yeah. It's like the rules don't apply to them. I mean, you never see anybody from any of the big banks going to prison. They get caught committing crimes like crazy. I mean, there are
one or two go off the 13th floor out the window for no reason after booking a restaurant with their wife later that evening. That happens from time to time.
That does happen. But as far as somebody testifying in open court about the crimes that they're committing while working for a bank, that seems to never happen because they settle out of court, and the fines that these banks rack up yearly are, they're not the fines you pay when you haven't done anything wrong. They're the fines you pay when you've been caught red-handed. I'm talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars in fines every year. But there's no incentive for them to stop. As you know, Gerald will tell you this. There's no incentive for them to stop because the fine is like 1 or 2 or 3% of the profits that they made from the criminal activity, and nobody goes to prison. So really, where's the punishment? Where's the incentive for them to ever stop doing this? Every now and then they throw like a low-level guy and they say, "Oh, that guy was doing something wrong." But mostly, for the most part, they just get busted rigging Forex and rigging LIBOR and these things that are they're not minor offenses. They affect trillions of dollars.
It's like a tax they pay on their crime. It's a significant little tax.
And I'm sure that they have a budget for it. I'm sure they account for it in advance. They know that Jamie Dimon knows, Citigroup will pay, whatever, $40 billion in fines this year. We understand that. That's just the cost of doing business. Because when you're in the business of fraud, you have to understand you're going to get caught at some point. So it's worth it for them to invest a little bit of money in politicians. It's worth it for them to buy judges. It's worth it for them to give Obama $400,000 for a speech after he gets out of the White House. Not because he's got anything important to say, but it is just part of the wink, wink, nod, nod. That's the deal. This is what you get when Clinton goes and speaks all over I'm talking about Bill, not Hillary. No one wants to hear her speak. But when Bill goes and gives speeches all over the place, it's not because people want to hear interesting or funny anecdotes. It's because this is the payback for making legislation and that benefits the banks. And this is just a legalized form of bribery. It's right in front of everybody's face, and anyone that can't see it is either willfully ignorant or just doesn't understand that the game is rigged.
The game is rigged. I couldn't have said it any better myself. And you mentioned Las Vegas in there, and this is where you witnessed the kind of shenanigans that goes on in the mortgage industry. But it's Las Vegas I want to stick with now, because we've been covering all of this stuff that's going on in the world, and we've been pointing out the fact that half of it is madness, the other half's a distraction. Let's get into the good stuff, as I would call it, the woo, Charlie. Yes. Because I often find that when we move, the shows we do, it's kind of half and half. And you like your woo as much as I do. And there's something new that's come out, a new documentary, and it's somebody that's been at the real kind of center of a lot of attention over the years when it comes to being a whistleblower, disclosing the kind of secret technology that our governments may have. And this, of course, is Bob Lazar. Now, a controversial character he may be, and I suppose any genuine whistleblower will be perceived to be a controversial character. There'll be lots of fighting, there'll be lots of people telling you there's disinfo. I think the smoke comes when they are genuine. That's my own opinion. But this new documentary that's out, he's resurfaced. It's available to watch, I believe, over on Vimeo. And I'm very, very looking forward to sitting down, Charlie, putting my feet up and catching up with the weird and wonderful world of an Area 51 whistleblower.
So am I. I remember, I lived in Las Vegas for almost 10 years, and I still work there. I go back and forth. So I'm there all the time. I remember George Knapp. He was the reporter, the local Las Vegas reporter that broke the story on Bob Lazar. He stayed as a reporter, which was always shocking to me. Not because I didn't think he was a good reporter. I thought he was great, but I was always shocked that they would allow him to continue to have a job after he broke this big story. So for a lot of people that don't remember, this was in the 80s, the late 80s, when he broke a story. Bob Lazar came out and talked about how he worked at Area 51 and how they were reverse engineering alien craft and that he was a part of it. Now, that obviously is a huge, it's a big story, but it was really, for most people, it was their first time hearing about Area 51. And it was for me. And it was, it's a fascinating place. So for people that don't understand the geography of it, Las Vegas is in the southern part of the state of Nevada. It comes to sort of like a point, and Las Vegas is almost down at the very bottom, that point there. Area 51 is to the north of it. The majority of Nevada is controlled by the Bureau of Land Management. The federal government controls it. So it's a great place to and there's a lot of nothingness out there too. So it's a great place for them to have test bases, Air Force bases, and things like that. They have an Air Force base in Las Vegas called Nellis Air Force Base, and that's not it's not a secret base or anything like that. A lot of Air Force people live in Las Vegas, and Nellis has been there for a long, long time. And then any of those Predator drones that are flown around the world, the ones that are doing strikes in Yemen and Afghanistan and Libya and Iraq and places, those are all flown out of Creech Air Force Base, which is also about 40 minutes outside of Las Vegas as well. So if you see, so it's kind of a hard thing to wrap your head around the fact that people are flying the drones right outside of Las Vegas that are flying on the other side of the world and dropping bombs. So this is sort of Las Vegas was the epicenter of it. And Bob Lazar broke the story there with help of George Knapp. He was absolutely skewered by the media. He was a kook. He was, we checked in. He didn't go to MIT like he said. We searched his records. There's no records of him being there. He didn't work at S4. He didn't work at Los Alamos. He didn't work any, you couldn't find anything on him. This guy's just a kook. He's he's just making this all up to get popularity. He wasn't selling anything that I could see, but so the story never made sense. He also got shot at during this time. So to me, that is not what you do to somebody that is just a kook who is standing on the street corner talking about how he worked with alien crafts, and coming across like a maniac. This was a legitimate guy, but it changed his life. It ended his career, of course, and he became a very controversial figure, and he kept quiet about this for the last 25 years or so. And now he's back because somebody talked him into doing a documentary. And so it's just come out. I haven't seen it yet. I know you haven't seen it yet, but we're both excited to watch it. We'll probably report back on it the next time we speak. But the thing about Bob Lazar that always made me feel like he was telling the truth is the same thing that made me think that Gary McKinnon was telling the truth. And that was that he had an outrageous story, but the story always stayed the same. He never added to it. He never subtracted from it. He didn't add a second phase where the blue chickens were telling him to do something. There was none of that stuff. It was just, this is my story. I don't have anything else to tell you, so I'm going to go away. Much like Gary McKinnon. I told you my story. There's nothing new to add. And then he sort of goes away. That actually, to me, gives it more credibility because unlike the blue chicken people, those guys always have an addendum to their story. Oh, I didn't tell you about this, or oh, there's more to this story. At some point, you've told the story, man. You've said everything there is to say, and that's where Bob Lazar and Gary McKinnon got to, and that's why, to me, I feel like they have more credibility. Plus, they were very detailed, and people asked them the questions backwards and forwards and out of order, and they gave the same answers all the time, and they didn't try to say they had it all figured out. They were just explaining that this is what they had, and so. I think Bob Lazar, I'm just an outsider. I don't know anything more than anybody else. But my opinion of him was that he had always seemed very credible to me, in part because they wanted him silenced so badly. That made me think that there had to be a good reason for that.
Absolutely. And I do believe that there are. If you want to call them alien crafts out there, people call them UFOs, whatever name you want to put on them, okay? I do think they exist. That's where I stand on that one. Just my opinion. And if that's the case, then I have to believe that there will be retrieval teams, stuff like that. And I'm with you, Charlie. I do think this is a genuine cat. And I totally agree with you when you say there was no phase 2, phase 3, almost as if having to feel forced to keep the story going. Like you say, it's got to end at some point. You were there, you done it, and that's it. That's what you've got. But, something else that I find really, really kind of compelling, worthy of thought, is the fact that he talks about this craft. He talks about the propulsion, which is anti-gravity. Now, he says the anti-gravity is achieved by using something called element 115 back in the 80s, right? Even if it's the early 90s. And then in 2003, over in the much brilliant and much loved Russia, see, this is why they call me a Russian agent, Charlie. In a laboratory over in the motherland, what happened was they created a synthetic chemical element, right, with the symbol MC and the atomic number 115. This was first synthesized, like I say, in 2003, and they dubbed it Moscovium. So here, it's a team of nuclear scientists talking about a previously unknown radioisotope, Moscovium-290. Now, is this what Bob Lazar was talking about way back in the day? Well, we can only speculate. But I tell you what, it's another kind of layer to the story that I think just adds to it, dude. I really do.
Was the name Plutonium taken?
Yes. I like that one. That'll be 116. I'll send that through to my handlers.
Yeah, I sent you the last time. Well, one of the last times I was in Las Vegas, I sent you the picture of the Janet Airlines, the Area 51 plane, and I jokingly said, "I'm on my way to Area 51." In Las Vegas, you'll see a white airplane with a red stripe running down the center of it. Those are the planes that take everyone to Area 51 every day. They take it there and back, just like they're commuting. And the call sign is Janet, Janet, and it jokingly stands for just another non-existent terminal, because these are the planes. But you can see them coming in and out. So that was Bob Lazar and that whole crew. Lived in Las Vegas, had that connection. But that's not an unusual thing. Lots of people were, almost everyone that works Area 51 is based in Las Vegas, and they catch these flights back and forth. And so he came out back in the day talking about this element that he was using, and that was what was making these flying discs fly. There's the propulsion formula that he was using involved this element, and everyone said, well, this element doesn't exist. That goes to show you that he's just full of it, because he's making this stuff up. And then, like you said, years later, all of a sudden, hey, what do you know? That same element that Bob Lazar was talking about, now it has gone on the periodic chart, and it's a real thing. What a surprise. Well, then, let's re-examine what Bob was saying about that, because if he's such a kook, then how the hell did he know about that? How could he have described it and gone into the detail that he did about that? And I'm not a scientist. I can't.
That's the kind of stuff that gets you shot at.
That's the kind of stuff that gets you shot at. Exactly. That'll do it right there. You want to know how to get people very angry at you. You take their secret technology and elements that don't exist and start talking about it. Frankly, I'm surprised he lived, because I could have very easily have heard a story about Bob Lazar, ODing in some dirty hotel room somewhere, and said, well, we told you he was a kook, but the fact that he's still alive is a credit to him. I think part of that is because he put that information out immediately and put it out as far as he could get it out, because it kept him alive, I think.
You're probably right there, and we spoke before the show, when it comes to Bob Lazar or any character like that, taking somebody out can have like an adverse effect, because it just makes more people look at what they were saying in the first place.
For sure. Yeah. When you start to see these whistleblowers that drop dead due to, suicides and things like that, when it's obvious that they're not suicides, that doesn't make me want to stop talking about them. That makes me want to talk about them even more. And so I think that it always happens to the people that say, I'm going to come out and tell this great story very soon about some. Those are the people that get whacked. Either you say something about it immediately, or you never say anything about it at all. You got to pick one or the other, because to stay right down the middle and threaten to drip this information out, that'll get you whacked for sure.
What's even stranger is, this is nothing new. You've got the Nazis who were working on things like Die Glocke, the Nazi bell, way back in the 40s and things. So it's a strange world, ladies and gentlemen. That's why there's always so much to talk about with people such as Charlie Robinson. We'll be back for one more segment of absolutely brilliant conversation, opinion, views, and controversy after these short messages. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
You know, I have so much fun on these shows sometimes. I actually feel a little guilty, the seriousness of some of the topics. But, you know, tonight it's been a lot of fun, and that's because I really love to hang out with Charlie Robinson. And like you all know me already, I mean, I like to kind of take that kind of more comical, light-hearted look at some serious topics, because that's my coping mechanism. And, you know, I think it's a good way, Charlie, we've said this before, to approach some of this stuff. It can get heavy, stuff like that. But I really love hanging with you, man. I think we bounce off each other very, very well. You know, somehow we'll have to do an X-rated version of this show someday, because I think we go equally well, because the breaks, you know, some of the best information, not the best, but most colourful sometimes, definitely comes out.
Oh yeah, well, thank you for saying that. I feel the same way. I enjoy talking to you because we get to talk about these crazy things, and we get to speculate, and that's okay too. Nobody expects us to have all the answers, but you got to have a sense of humor about it, because some of the things that are happening in this world are so terrifying that if you dwell on that, you'll waste your life. You'll waste all the good stuff in your life. So let's let's acknowledge it. But
when you're on radio, I mean, I would never ever put Chris and Cherie Geo, people behind the network, you know, in a position where I'm coming out with foul language, and I think it sounds quite bad, especially this time of day over in the US. It's like early afternoon on the West Coast. But there's sometimes, you know, you just have to swear at some of the stuff that's going on. And even Joe Rogan, he had a scientist on the other day, right? And he was saying that when they studied the brain, they found that people who swear are actually able to cope better and take pain for longer periods of time. So it literally does help one. Not that I'm saying we should all go about swearing every sentence, Charlie, but it's a release you have to in this day and age, right?
Well, I think from what everyone has told me, Chris and Cherie sound like they're really a great couple, and they want it, you know, and it's understandable. They want to keep, they don't want to have dirty language to give anybody a reason to have to not carry the show, to not have these important topics be put out. You'd hate to have someone say, well, I don't want to have you guys on there because I heard somebody say the F word one time. So I can understand keeping it. I'm not in favor of censorship, but I am in favor of decency and not being a jerk, you know, and respecting somebody's platform and you know, the show.
I had to bite my tongue tonight. You have to bite your tongue. Some of the madness in this world, dude. Absolutely.
But I mean, what a great batch of shows on TFR. You know, I mean, you can get into everything. Like whatever you're into, it's on there. You know, and it's just, I think that's a testament to them running a solid platform and but then at the same time, sort of being hands off and allowing people to tackle these topics. Some of them that conflict with one another, which is fine because it's good for conversation. But I think you're on the right platform.
Oh, you are absolutely right, brother. And a big shout out to Chris and Cherie. You can catch them at the weekends on here. They do a live stream very often as well over on YouTube, Beyond the Veil with Chris and Cherie Geo. And of course, don't forget Lucky coming up after tonight's show with Brent Thomas tonight. There's Brooks Agnew takes a night off. Brent steps in, and that's going to be, you know, really good to hear that. It's going to be a lot of woo, I imagine, coming up on Quantum Connections tonight. Talking of woo, you've been involved in your own little episode of woo, a little birdie tells me.
Yeah, well, I had, when I worked in Las Vegas, there was a period when I worked in North Las Vegas, and that is real close to where Nellis Air Force Base was. And I was leaving work one day. It was a summer day. I had my sunroof open, and I was stopped at a stoplight. And you ever have like a, you know, airplane or something fly over you? It creates a shadow that's kind of noticeable. I was looking forward. I wasn't looking up, and I wasn't looking behind me, but I noticed, because my sunroof was open, an enormous shadow over my head, like kind of like, you know, whatever, a big bird.
I'm ridiculous. My son, he hates walking to the store with me, dude. Anything, a bird goes over my head and I'm looking up. I'm desperate. I'm like Mulder. I want to believe, man.
So as I'm sitting there, noticing a shadow go over my head, it's not too long before it goes in front of me, and where I'm looking out the windshield, I see what it is. It goes over, and it is a huge stealth bomber that is, I don't know, it is really close to, it's not that far above my head. and it's making a big banking left turn in order to land at Nellis. And I'm just like stunned. Like, I can't believe I just saw it. And within a minute, another one flew right over my head, and it was landing as well. I was just blown away with how big they are. But it reminds me of a conversation I had with my old boss. Back in the 80s, she was a flight attendant on those Janet Airline flights that went from Las Vegas to Area 51 and back. And one day after, after work, I found, I was just kind of talking to her about crazy things, and she was one of those people that had a real open mind. And I said, "Did you ever see anything at Area 51 when you're going back and forth?" Like, I'm thinking spaceships. And she's like, "No, I never saw anything like that." She's like, "But what she did see was back in the 80s, late 80s, I guess, as they were on the ground and on Area 51, and she was just like a flight attendant, like a normal flight attendant. They pull up the exterior staircase and the people get off, and she's standing there at the door. And on one of the other runways coming in was this huge plane, and it was a B-2 stealth bomber, but there was something wrong with it, because she said she saw it crash. The guy, I guess, ejected or whatever, but she saw the thing crash on the runway and shower the whole place with debris. She jumped back into the airplane because she was right at the top of the stairs by the door. So she went jumping back in, and it rained debris all over the place. And they told everyone, make the arrangements with your family. Tell them that, get your babysitters in line. You're not going to be going home for 3 days. We're going to have the runway closed. So she's like, "I didn't ever see a spaceship, but I did see a stealth bomber crash, a $2 billion stealth bomber crash." So I thought that was kind of a crazy, crazy thing to witness. And I have no reason to believe that she would have been making that up.
Absolutely. And, think of the other craft that we haven't seen, our own craft, I'm meaning. And I think that accounts for a lot of the sightings. And I mean, that doesn't make them any less interesting, in my opinion, because this is kind of future craft. And if Bob Lazar's to be believed, like I think he is, we could literally be looking at the back engineering of something otherworldly way back in the day. But I do also believe there's craft out there. Something else I believe in, Charlie, is that, there's probably a more convenient way to travel between stars and planets and things. Sounds like I've been watching too much Stargate 1, but there you go, right there. Stargates, dude. I honestly do think that probably in ancient times that there was a Stargate system. And that would suggest to me, if they came here to put a Stargate on planet Earth, wherever else you come out the other end, it's going to be an Earth-like planet, right? So they're not going to send you in the middle of some kind of methane giant or something like that. And I think when you look at the time it would take us just to get to Alpha Centauri, 4 years, and, that's in the near neighborhood. You start going across the galaxy, or dare I say intergalactic, you're looking at thousands of years, man. Yet you could be there instantly through a Stargate. I think that's more possible than crafts making their way here.
Well, it goes back to a story that I put in the book under the chapter, The Ben Rich Walk-Off Home Run. And it's the story that Jan Harzen tells about being at UCLA and there was a guest speaker, Ben Rich. He was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, which is, they jokingly call it the United States of Lockheed Martin because they run the government. But beyond Lockheed,
I'm just saying they've got a D-Wave. Just throwing that in there, these.
Yeah, yeah. And in Skunk Works is the secret airplane development wing of Lockheed Martin. So Ben Rich would be a guy that would be in the know about this. And so he talked during this speech given at UCLA, I think in 94, he talked about how they had found an error in the equations and they had figured out a way to take ET home. And of course, you drop that on a crowd of people listening, there's going to be some follow-up questions after after his speech is over. And that's what happened. And then Jan Harzen followed Ben out to the parking lot and said, I'm interested in propulsion. Jan Harzen also wound up being, or maybe at the time was, the head of MUFON. So he really had an interest in this sort of technology, or, if you get a chance to talk to Ben Rich, you can ask him a million questions. But he said, asked him about how the propulsion system on this works. And Ben Rich flipped the question back on him and said, well, let me ask you a question. How does ESP work? And he said, I don't know. All points in time and space are connected. And then Ben said, that's how it works, and walked off. And died a year or two later. And so when you hear about Stargates and things like that, and then you have the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, maybe in a moment of where he let his guard down, maybe he was talking to some other industry people. He's talking to a guy who's way into propulsion and can speak his lingo. Maybe he knows he's close to dying. I don't know. But that was the conversation that he had with Jan Harzen. And it makes you think that they, maybe there's something to that. Maybe they know something we don't know. And if it is as easy as all points in time and space are connected, and that's how you get from point A to point B, he would be the guy to know it. So it's an interesting story. I put that in the book because part of this control mechanism is the suppression of technology and the suppression of science. And we know that, we see that on a daily basis, that, we're putting oil and gas into our cars when we don't need to. We understand that there's suppressed technology that can make all that obsolete. And that we understand also that there's a financial marketplace that's set up to benefit from this current paradigm of petrochemicals and petroelectric power.
That's why, aside from the fact I'm one of his number one fanboys, that's what encourages me about the fact that it's Elon Musk that, on the face of it's going to win the race to go up to Mars and colonize. And I call it a race, because I think we've always been destined to go there, Charlie, to go back there, probably, in reality, from way, way back in ancient times. But that's another show altogether, probably. But, I think when you look at what Musk's doing down here with his gigafactories, answering, the call and making a bet out of building one of these big gigafactories down in Australia. I think it was the world's biggest battery so that they don't have blackouts down there anymore. All the stuff that he's doing with the solar panels as well. Perhaps him going up there, he's going to learn from the mistakes that we have made here. And not to be defeatist, but, the resources, the kind of, the fuels we go after, all this kind of stuff. Some of it probably is irreversible, and it'll be good to see that at least when we get a second go, not that all of us are going to get there, far from it, that we're going to try and do it right this time, eh?
Yeah, I like Elon Musk as well. I don't know, you don't know how controlled or controllable he is. He seems to be a bit of a maverick in the sense that if he has an idea, he just goes out and does it. If he wants to build flamethrowers, he's going to go build flamethrowers and sell them because it's funny, So there's an aspect of him that I really like. I'd be disappointed if I found out that he was compromised in some way, but I suppose I always have to sort of keep that in the back of my head as a possibility.
We have to, don't we? Because if you don't keep your mind open, new information, it's going to hit you right between the eyes and can cause you to react. And when you're a billionaire like he is, he's certainly going to be around all of these cats that we expose on a week-to-week basis. So absolutely, but I have to hope, Charlie, that once in a while, there's good people out there. And when you've got billions of dollars plus a good person with, semi-good intentions, can't say I'm a big fan of the neural lace and hooking us up to an AI, right? But, the way he goes about other stuff, I just have to be the optimist there until he totally proves me wrong and goes and starts mining Mount, up there on Mars or something.
Well, he seems curious, and I find that to be a legitimate personality trait of his. It doesn't seem manufactured. I like that. That's a human trait that I think a lot of the globalists don't have, this curiosity. Like, he wants to know what's out there. Maybe they don't have it because they already know. Maybe he's just trying to figure it out. But I would bet on him being a good guy more so than a bad guy. I'd be very disappointed if I were to find out later that he was some bad guy, that came through University of Pennsylvania. It was.
You just know when he's on his way to Mars, there's going to be images live from the craft they're going in, the dragon or whatever it is. And he's going to be sitting there stroking a big cat looking all evil. Dr. Musk. He turns all bad guy overnight, dude.
Yeah, that would be disappointing and funny at the same time.
Exactly. I tell you, I wouldn't put it past him to do something like that. If you follow him on Twitter, he's a right maverick on there as well, to the point where he destroys the share value of his companies.
I know, and I don't know what his problem was with the guy that was the soccer coach or the dive guy at the Thai missing soccer team that was in the caves, but he kept calling that one guy pedo guy all the time. That cracked me up. I mean, I don't know if he was. I don't know if he has information that we don't have, but it was just
a bit of a snap judgment.
Snap judgment. I never
kids from a cave.
I never saw a picture of the guy, so I don't really. Maybe I should look it up to see. Maybe just looking at him, you go, yeah, that's a pedo guy for sure.
And then he takes the joint on Joe Rogan's. Not the best movie either. That's got now, I think, any space company, they're all getting drug tested and all the rest of it. Yeah, he's crazy, man.
But he knew there were repercussions from that, and he was just like, whatever. I mean, and for the record, I watched that whole interview. I thought he was high all along, but he wasn't. And then he smoked that at the very end, barely took much of a hit, but he's kind of a strange dude. Like his answers to questions were like, he thinks about it for a long time. He's very deliberate. And then he comes across with this answer, and the answer makes sense in the end, but he sort of has a hard time getting to it. But so I just assumed that he had smoked it at the beginning, and then that's why his answers were a bit disjointed. But then when I watched the whole thing in its entirety, I realized his answers were disjointed to begin with, and he didn't get high until the very end. And even then, he took like 2 hits. And like, seriously, it's legal. It's legal where I am. It's legal in California now too. So I don't understand what the problem is. The shareholders should, maybe go see Joe Rogan and lighten up.
And of course, he was drinking whiskey at the same time. And I think when you go on that show, I think it's a given, right? Unless you're like one of the UFC fighters, who I believe are allowed to smoke marijuana anyway. It's part of a jiu-jitsu culture. I've heard them talking about that on the show. You know, so what if people are hanging out behind the set having a quick drink before they go on, if they have a smoke? I think he was a bit more awkward than usual. I think he had one before he went on as well, Charlie, to be honest with you.
He might have, but then, it could have been a great...
I think it was deliberate. Part of me thinks he done that knowing the repercussions that would come from the company.
Well, he wouldn't. He obviously knew that there would be repercussions, and he either did it on purpose or didn't care, or maybe he was trying to work out the best advertisement he could get for a self-driving car. You can get high on Joe Rogan, you can have some drinks, get in your self-driving Tesla, and it just takes you home.
It did work, I have to admit, because I think that must be one of the most watched Joe Rogan shows, and they get watched millions of times.
Yeah, and then he gave him a flamethrower. A couple of weeks after that. So
it just doesn't make sense. And then he gave him a flamethrower. No sentence should finish that way.
So they said, "Why did you do it?" He says, "I just thought it'd be funny. I just thought it'd be cool." And well, how many did you make? We made 50,000 of them. Jesus, did you sell them? Yeah, we sold them all in 3 days. He's like, oh my God.
Nothing to worry about there then.
No, this is a guy who is building rockets and cars and burrowing underneath the earth in his company and then making flamethrowers at the same time. How can you not like that guy?
He's different. He really is. And people, they absolutely hate on me for being his biggest fan. But, that's my dream show one day. One day when I grow up, Charlie. Live from the surface of Mars. It'll only take us about 20 odd minutes to get a reply at the speed of light. It'll be all right.
Yeah, but according to NASA has it all figured out because they did such a good live feed from the moon. And yes, that was 50 years ago, but they perfected the technology. Of course, they destroyed it after that because that's what you do with technology. But, let's not get bogged down in the details here. I'm sure that the Facebook portal wishes they had the same technology that they had on the moon to get those quick response video Skype conversations between the astronauts and Houston.
Of course, we've got the Chinese. They're up there. And we've had the Russians. They're saying they're going back. Well, they're going to send something to the moon to prove whether America were there or not. And you'd think, right? I mean, look at technology, how much that's moved since... the 60s to where we are now. And then look at rocketry and stuff like that. It's almost like we've gone backwards, man. There's something far wrong there.
Yeah, but Steph Curry is outing them. He's taken all the heat out here in the United States over the last week for saying, I don't think the moon landing was real. I tweeted to him. I said, hey man, I got your back. I'll send you my book. Let me know where to send it, because I do a pretty good job on taking apart the moon landing in the book as well. And I might add that it was the one thing that I did begrudgingly, because that was the one conspiracy that I really, really wanted to believe in. But as I got closer to it, I became sadly convinced that it was not as it appeared. And so anyway, the offer still stands to Steph. If he wants the book, just email me.
I think there was just too much to lose, with the kind of race against the Russians at the time. And whether they physically made it there or not, I'm open to it. But I think what we seen was definitely the work of Stanley Kubrick. And it was it's because there was too much to lose. They couldn't lose face at the time of the space race with the Russians.
Yeah, and I could almost understand that on some level, that if they came out and said, listen, we went about it the wrong way. Or if they said we actually did land, but we can't.
Showing like the best of Americans blowing up and maybe losing their lives on this first mission. Can you imagine the damage that would have done?
Well, it would definitely have it would create a lack of support for sort of.
See, that's just why I just could not, in my opinion, I just don't think they could risk it, man. It's no danger.
Yeah, I think that, what I've come to understand about the United States government is that there is no line that they will not cross. They don't care. If they would not have a lot of people say they wouldn't lie to us about that. They would lie to you about what they had for breakfast. They don't care. They're pathological liars at the highest levels of government. So yeah, of course they would lie to you about the moon landing if it suited if it was in their best interest to keep it secret. And I don't think anything that comes from them is the fact, because they always have to counter that with the fact that they're intentionally spreading disinformation to keep their opponents off their trail. So yeah, you're never going to get the honest to God truth from the United States government, and nor should you sit around waiting for it.
And I don't even
colossal just waste of time.
I don't think they or the British government get any of the good juicy kind of woo that we would get into anyway. These people are controlled at a certain level. President of the United States, the Prime Minister over here, all controlled, Charlie. And it's a need to know basis. And there's some things that they just will never get to know. Kind of things that we'll bring up on shows like this. And who honestly knows what is going on in reality? Because the one thing I've come to learn and know and trust is that reality is really stranger than fiction. And, the truth, it doesn't have to stick to kind of preconceived guidelines and a consensus reality from the population. It can go anywhere it wants, right?
For sure. And your version of reality might be different from my version of reality. There'll be some certain aspects of it that will remain the same throughout, but we can both take a look at the same situation and have different opinions of it. So is that is that it's the same thing happened, but if you have two different opinions of it, you have two different versions of it, your reality, who's to say your reality isn't correct? So we
glad you kind of went down this line, because we're almost out of time. And we were talking about whistleblowers on the show earlier, and Bob Lazar, I'm talking about the kind of things that gets you the bullet in the back of the head. But I come into contact with some very interesting characters. I'm included in some very interesting email chains and Discord chats and a whole host of things. You come across things from time to time and you think, wow. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go into it because I wouldn't betray the confidence of the kind of information and the person putting this out there. But it's somebody that claims to be very, very kind of in a position where you would know things. And it's to do with woo, man. It's to do with the Mandela effect, no less. And there's something in my gut, you've got to keep an open mind when you see any of these things. You've got to just take it at face value, Could be anyone saying anything. But, Charlie, there's just something to this. There's a level of detail that I don't know, and I'm not saying it's the perfect barometer, but my gut says, you know what, Kev, there's something to this. You need to follow this up. So I don't know if it's ever going to come off, but Mandela effect from the inside, ooh, there's a lot to get into there, dude.
Yeah, that's the holy grail of woo, as far as I'm concerned.
Right now,
because
yeah.
it's a crazy story, of course, but it's not any crazier than some of the other things that we've heard over the years. And if there is a way to control, we have to acknowledge that we have a hard time understanding what time is. So we're at a disadvantage to that. So it is possible that somebody could be manipulating time. If we don't know what it is, we don't know how it works.
You never say Doctor Who, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's not my man anymore. Doctor Who's a woman. That takes us back to the start of the show.
Yes, it does, actually. Doctor Who knows who. We definitely have to keep an open mind. I'd be interested to hear the story of it at some point. Maybe you can get permission to tell it.
Watch this space. We're up in the game for 2019, and absolutely, a lot of verifying to be done. But that aside, Charlie, I've had a brilliant time tonight, and I hope you'll join us again next month. And one last time where people can follow you, my good man.
Oh, they can follow me at Facebook, / the Octopus of Global Control. I post videos and funny things.
May I just add, your Twitter is very, very funny. It's one of my favourite feeds. There's a lot of good stuff on there. And I follow a lot of people. Charlie Robinson, ladies and gentlemen. Coming up right after these groovy messages, it's my good friend Lucky and Brent Thomas. That's going to be Quantum Connections. Don't go anywhere, because wherever you are, make it TFR. And Denny, touch that dial.